Hi everyone, I'm Josh Chin and I'm an investor at Onsa Capital. Here at Onsa, we're strong believers in the value of mentorship and being able to learn from the experiences of others. So we started Growing Pains to help highlight impactful learnings of preeminent founders and operators within our network. Today, I'm joined by Scott Williamson, ex-CPO of GitLab.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate the invite. I'm Scott Williamson. I am currently a product advisor working with about 12 high growth, early stage companies to help either the founder who still owns product or the hired head of product to do their best work and effectively scale their companies. Prior to that, had a long run in product management and product leadership. I had a 10-year stint with a company called Wiley Technology, which was acquired by CA in the application performance management space. A 6-year run as VP of product with SendGrid, which was acquired by Twilio. And then the last 3 years as chief product officer at GitLab, where I owned product management. We started up a growth team, pricing, product ops, and M&A.
Thanks so much for sharing your background, Scott. Excited to learn more about your experiences. To dive right into things, a major decision for startups is figuring out when a founder should start handing off product related responsibilities. When do you think is the right time for a startup to bring on a product leader? And what's the best way to make that transition seamless?
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice I would give is post product market fit. I think what you want to see is a repeatable, a well-defined ICP in ideal customer profile, plus a repeatable ability to sell to that ICP. And if you've established that, then you can start to hand that off. I think delegating, getting to that point is oftentimes problematic. The other signal might be that the founder who has owned product is having trouble scaling. There comes a point, usually around the time where you're going from maybe 2 to 3 teams or 20 plus engineers, where the overall responsibilities of being a founder plus working with that many engineers on a day-to-day basis just swamps the founder. And then the rest of the team gets a lot less efficient because they just don't have enough guidance. And so that's oftentimes a great time to bring in someone to take the day-to-day lead on product management stuff. To succeed in the transition, I think you got to get real clear in your own head as a founder about what you want to own and what you want the new person coming in to own. I think a lot of times people aren't clear enough in their head, and then you kind of go back and forth, and the person you've brought in has a really whipsawed experience. So my advice is to take a look at all the artifacts that exist, all the meetings that exist, and all the decision points that come up, and clarify for the team and for your new incoming product leader what role you want to play in each of those. Do you want to own it yourself? Do you want them to provide you with a recommendation, but you make the call? Or do you want to delegate the whole thing to them? There are different ways you can be involved, and the clearer you can get with them, the cleaner that relationship's going to be. And what you decide to hand off is going to depend on your own interest in it, your own passion for it, as well as the seniority of the person coming in. Finally, whatever it is that you align on that you want to delegate to them, support them. Don't cut them off at the knees. Allow them to clearly own that. Back them up in front of the team. Set them up for success.
Continuing along the lines of product market fit, I see a lot of early stage companies that try to target multiple personas at once. What are some risks to starting too broad? And when do you think is the right time for a startup to expand their ICP?
Well, this happens all the time. I think the reason is because it's human nature. In life, we oftentimes want to keep our options open. It feels safer to do that. But counterintuitively, focus is your friend. Allow yourself and your company to close some doors, at least in the short term. If you don't, the risk is that you get spread too thin and you can't apply enough focus and energy to make yourself clearly the best choice for a specific ICP. If you try to serve a bunch of ICPs, you get spread thin. You don't do enough to win in any of them. And then you just can't catch momentum, you can't scale as a company. So I think the right time to start to think about expanding your ICP is when you're fully delivering on the value proposition to your core ICP segment. Are they buying regularly? Are they giving you good feedback? Is your churn? Are you seeing your churn, user churn levels flatten? Those are all great signs that you're delivering something of value in your core segment. And then you can start to think about peeling off investment to go after additional personas, additional use cases, additional adjacencies to make sure you can continue to grow and expand your TAM in the medium to long term.
How do you know when you're tapping out of your existing ICP?
I think there's a couple of signals. One is if you have limited headroom with your total addressable market, and another is if your growth rate is slowing because there's just not enough uh, customers to sell to in that particular segment. I'll give an example I've lived through myself at SendGrid. SendGrid started out as an email API. So it's an API for developers to add email into their applications, primarily for transactional email purposes like password resets. But after probably around the time we were 50 to 100 million, I don't remember the exact point, but we realized that that market was max 500 million. And if you do the math, it doesn't take very long before your growth rate is definitely gonna decline because there's just not enough room to keep growing at the pace we wanted to. We wanted to be north of rule of 40, growing 40-ish%, and the market size just wouldn't allow it. And so we ended up targeting the adjacency of email marketing, targeting marketers, leveraging the underlying platform we had built for email, and that ended up working very well. But again, those were both signals we were seeing: limited TAM and slowing growth relative to our ambitions as a company.
Switching topics a bit here, I spend a large amount of my time focusing on open source software, and a common challenge I see is when the open source project is too good, so there's not a huge incentive for users to switch to a paid product. Given your experiences at GitLab, what is some advice you'd have for open source startups looking to go from project market fit to product market fit?
Yeah, this is a great topic. In the early days of an open source project, the founders are trying to drive broad adoption, oftentimes trying to drive developer love to create a brand halo for themselves. They're trying to create contributions to mature the product really rapidly. And those are all great things to do and are necessary when you're at the project building stage. But if your ambition is to be a commercial company and to make money and get VC funding and all the rest, you need a path to monetization. And the earlier you think through how you're going to do that, the better, so that you don't paint yourself into a corner. There are several ways that companies make money on open source. The path that GitLab chose is called an open core business model, which means that you have the core product version, usually called a community version, that's free and people can download for free and provide contributions to, and it creates this sort of sense of community and creates contributions from people outside your company. And then you layer on top of that proprietary versions that are paid. So GitLab has what it calls a buyer-based pricing model, which I highly recommend as sort of the underpinnings of Open Core, where the free version was for individual developers. The premium version is for teams and team leaders as buyers. And Ultimate was for organizations and for sort of C-level CTO type buyers. And when we got crystal clear about that, things became much easier. GitLab cranks out 50 to 60 new features, new things, new additions to the product every month. And by having this rubric, it became a lot easier for the product team to choose which tier to put new things in. It became a lot easier for us to be planful about how we should layer in features because we knew who we were targeting with each one. And oftentimes we ask the PMs to create a laddered tiering strategy. Like, what are we going to put in for the individual dev that'll ladder to a team, that'll ladder to an org? And then you can create this groundswell of value in each one. Like, the package for individuals is awesome. The package for teams is awesome. The package for orgs is awesome. Everyone knows which package is for them, and it's easy for them to make a choice on what to buy. If you don't do this early enough, the risk is you give too much away in free, and it can be really hard to recover from that.
Another key to GitLab's success was the successful transition from a point solution to an end-to-end platform. When should a company start thinking about this shift?
It's an attractive position to be in if you can build a platform, and many of the biggest software companies in the world have taken that approach. It's amazing for growth generation because you can oftentimes serve multiple use cases, multiple ICPs, multiple personas, and it can increase your TAM, and it has a lot of benefits. But tons of companies fail to make the transition from a point product to a platform. And I think you need to earn the right to be a platform. Not every point product is positioned to evolve into a platform. There are a few things that I would look for as good signals that you deserve to be a platform. One of them is, are your customers pulling you? As an example, I mentioned SendGrid evolving from an email API into an email platform that served both developers and marketers. We had great signals from our customers that would work. We had customers pulling us. They were like, hey, we love your platform. Why can't we do marketing stuff on it? So if you're hearing that may be a great signal. And then GitLab also evolved from a point product. It started out as an open source alternative to GitHub focused on source code management, and now is an end-to-end DevSecOps platform. How that happened was the CEO, Sid, decided to bundle source code management with CI. And it was actually a bit of an accident. They did it mostly for development efficiency. They thought, hey, if this is all in one app, we'll get development efficiency rather than having two code bases. But turns out the internal teams and customers were like, whoa, that unlocked a lot by having those two things side by side. And so that was the light bulb for Sid that, hey, we should go broad. We should turn this into a full platform because it solves a ton of customer pain. If you think about the DevOps lifecycle, there's a tool for planning and source code and CI and CD and monitoring, and it's a total mess. And developers are inefficient. It's hard to write code. It's hard to test it. It's hard to ship it. And so GitLab clearly solved a bunch of existing pain. So that's a good reason to move into a platform. It was a differentiated strategy. At that point, no one was talking about a platform. I think at that point, the DevOps market was a series of specialized tools that went really deep in a particular area. So it was novel for GitLab to pick that strategy. So to boil it all down, I think the three good reasons are you seeing customer pull? Is it differentiated? And if you create a platform, does it solve problems in a new way?
What's the best way for a company to navigate that transition from point solution to platform?
It's a super tricky product management problem. At the end of the day, you need to find the right balance between going broad and establishing yourself as a platform while still maintaining your lead and your credibility and your value prop in your core area where you built your company. And we went through phases where we would pivot between breadth and depth. When I started at the company, GitLab had made a giant investment in R&D and was in the process of building out teams to mature this end-to-end DevSecOps platform. So this was definitely a time focused on breadth. We were building new teams, new capabilities, starting to tell the story about GitLab as a platform. And so we were willing to sacrifice some depth in core areas like source code management and CI in return for starting to build out that story and that credibility. However, a year and a half in, we felt there was quite a bit of risk in going so broad that we lost our edge, we lost our lead in the core areas. So we ended up consolidating back. We had about 80% of our R&D investment on four DevOps stages: source code management, CI, and security, plus manage, which had a bunch of enterprisey, single sign-on type features. So we picked those because there was alignment between product and sales about where sales wanted to land. They wanted to land on source code and CI as the core value. And then they wanted to expand up to security because that was the anchor tenant of our ultimate package, which was $99 a seat. It was 5 times more than the next price tier. So we thought we could increase our average selling price by investing in security. Plus, we were seeing a lot of pull for that from our customers. And at that point, we were willing to go slower on the breadth in some of these areas that were less used in return for a real focus and a real right to win in source code, CI, and security. And so you have to kind of read your situation and get aligned on this tension between breadth and depth, and probably swing the pendulum from side to side as your situation changes.
Most of your product experience to date has been building products that focus on selling to developers. What are some tips you might have for winning the hearts and minds of this group?
Yeah, open source is a great strategy if it fits your product and your business model. Leading with open source, developers can use your product for free. They can contribute to it. I think when your project has a lot of contributions, like GitLab had something like 300 contributions a month, every one of those contributions creates sort of a sense of ownership from all the developers that participate in it. I think it creates loyalty and trust that's hard to replicate from a pure proprietary standpoint. However, there are plenty of proprietary products that have done great with developers, Twilio and SendGrid included. If you're going with a proprietary strategy, then I highly recommend some sort of a freemium offer that will allow developers out there to try your product. GitLab had a really awesome, fully featured free version that was capped based on the number of transactions, and so it prevented someone from using it at scale, but it allowed the developer to really try it and hopefully fall in love with it. And then then we had a really nice free to paid conversion motion on top. As far as the product experience, developers also have things that they care about, things that they look for. If they see these things, they'll be more likely to trust the product. One is clean, thoughtful, and consistent APIs. Like if those things aren't there, that's the first piece of the product developers look at. If it's clean, thoughtful, and consistent, it'll be like, okay, these folks know what they're doing. You also want clean and thorough docs. Oftentimes, developers don't want to call support. They don't want to ask someone for help. They want to try to figure it out on their own. And by having clean and thorough docs, you set them up for success. I think you also want like a factual marketing voice. I think developers are sort of allergic to buzzwordy, uh, unbelievable marketing stances and claims. I think that turns them off. Transparency is a big deal. I think developers really love transparency. So is your pricing page transparent? And at GitLab, we published our roadmap, which I think our customers loved because they could see it, they could contribute to it. We had all of our roadmap out on the open GitLab project. People could see what we were up to, could add comments and contributions, felt like they were part of it. So I recommend that if you can afford that level of transparency. And then finally is a PLG motion tends to work well if you're selling straight to developers, because it's easy to buy. They can pay with a credit card. They can get started usually at a low level before teams or orgs get involved.
Awesome. Well, this has been great, Scott. Thanks so much for taking the time to share your insights with me. I'm sure they'll help many startups that are working through these same challenges.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. That was a fun conversation.